Hey, I'm Wes, the Explosion, and when it comes to Mega Man series, the most oddball of them is probably Legends. Sure, Battle Network pioneered essentially its own genre, but that had enough entries and shared DNA with Star Force, whereas Legends is just two games that are not really like any of the other titles that came before or after. More than a Mega Man in 3D, I think it'd be easier to draw comparisons between it and Zelda or Metroid Prime. Yet despite it not being either a platformer or whatever this is, I'm still quite fond of it, and would like to do a personal ranking of the games. The problem is the whole two entries thing. I'm gonna give it a shot though and take some liberties, so this round, you can try predicting not just how I'm going to place things, but how exactly I'm gonna make this work. Place your bets now. Starting out with a creative choice, I'm doing something that I think will be hard to disagree with and putting Legends 3 at the bottom. If you're wondering how I can put a canceled game on the list, well, that pretty much is the crux of it. As much as I love Legends, the games do have a lot of issues, a combination of the standard early 3D problems and limitations, and at the time being a new series that was still trying to find its footing. A new entry a decade after the last is the perfect opportunity to knock it out of the park, learning from what worked and what didn't previously, and combining that with the better tech and controls of a new console, along with the experience of many years of 3D gaming, both at Capcom and their competition. Not to mention clearing up a major cliffhanger in the process. That's what Legends 3 should have been, and from the footage of the prototype they were working on, that's what we would have gotten. It looks like it plays a lot better than it did on PS1, and I really wish I could have gotten a chance to try it out, but alas, it was cancelled. Perhaps you could even say super cancelled, because that prototype that I mentioned was actually supposed to be a release demo for the main game. It would have been a paid sample, though with it having 10 missions and serving as a kind of prologue to the full title, it sounded worth it, more than the typical just the first stage type of affair you'd normally get for a promo. Not only that, but it was meant to kinda gauge interest in the full product, which is pretty fair. Sure, I want it, and if you took the time to click on this, chances are you do too, but if that amounts to just like 34 of us, it might not be worth it to Capcom. This was a direct chance to vote with our wallets, as it were, yet, despite the burden of proof being placed on us, we never got our day in court. This too was cancelled. Various reasons were given, but it still kinda feels like we were lied to. If we'd been given the chance to show up and then failed, that'd be on us. But this, from what I've read, the demo wasn't completely finished, but one person did get a chance to play the build that they had. That we didn't even get a chance to try this when it was in a playable state just feels, well, mean-spirited, and like Capcom reneged on their deal. So in my mind, Legends 3 remains a broken promise. Legends 2 at number 3 though likely will be a bit controversial. And to a degree, even I'm kinda shocked. After all, the sequel improves upon the original in pretty much every way. Bigger game, more in-depth story, better controls, more varied location and enemies. What's not to love? And yet, despite all this, the game has a lot of sequences that I just really do not like playing. It can be tricky to hit flying enemies with a lock-on that can be hard to wrangle towards what you actually want to be targeting. There's a lot of sections that feel really drawn out, and some extra steps are even thrown in for just basic upgrades. You buying something from the store and needing to remember to talk to Roll to make it usable, despite it only having a single component. While the dungeons have more environments, it's easy to get lost in the same looking hallways. The final boss feels pretty messy, and when I finally managed to beat them, it felt less like a test of my skill, and more like a battle between my health bar and theirs. And for some crazy reason, it seems like they looked at Ocarina of Time, saw the water temple, and said, we can do it better. Not realizing that a positive times a negative is just a bigger negative. Smaller negative? What would the size comparison for -20 and -80 be? Anyway, even if you love this game, you cannot convince me that this part is anything but a slog. That's not to say that I don't have fun with this title. I do really enjoy the game's story. When I first started playing, I was gushing about how much better it controlled with the extra sticks and was having a blast, feeling really empowered until I started hitting the speed bumps. It feels like they tried to add as much to this one as they could, not really considering whether some of the bigger was actually better, and I'm less enthusiastic about this one than I feel I should be as a result. End of the day, I have a hard time trying to decide whether I like this one or not. Does the good outweigh the bad? Can I eventually learn the ins and outs well enough that I can minimize the lows and maximize the highs? Will I get to the point where I can put this on the agenda without some trepidation? Who knows, but for now, I remain mixed on it. I'm just a straight up fan of the original Legends though, which I'm putting at 2. This one's pretty much the epitome of what I've been complaining about, it having many of the issues I mentioned with the controls and limitations of early 3D, and me even having the lesser version of the game, Mega Man 64. I was definitely worried when I broke out the old system to play this one, and yet, I had a lovely time with it. While simpler, the story is charming, feeling more like an episodic Saturday morning cartoon, and introducing a lot of fun characters that I've grown to love. The smaller scale of Cadillac's Island feels cozier and makes it easier to get attached. The dungeons might not have much variety with largely the same designs, but it is mind-blowing when you start opening up paths with the drill arm and finally realize that that's because they're all actually the same labyrinth, massive and interconnected. And Amelia. Plus, I've been a fan of Mega Man for as far back as I can remember. So seeing the series make the jump to 3D and a new genre, complete with subquests and a bigger focus on storytelling, was something special, despite all the drawbacks. Not only does it get points for being the first, but it also gets a nostalgia bonus, being the only entry I owned when it was current, with some of the tracks awakening memories in me. Plus, it was a sort of lunch table game for me in my adolescence. I gave up on 64 at least 2 times. The first against the Ferdinand when the cartridge needed to be returned to the rental place before I could really figure out the controls, then again against the Marl Wolf when I got my own copy. I had a friend though who also had an N64, and we'd discuss games in the cafeteria. While I did get frustrated a few times early on, hearing him talk about what I was missing out on was appealing enough that I picked it back up and tried again and again until I pulled through. It gave me the joy of overcoming my walls, running free after my initial struggles, finding oddball things to do around town, seeing how much of the ruins I could map out, coming up with strategies to grind up cash to upgrade my weapons, and just in general, learning to love a game that at first didn't feel like it was for me. If I hadn't done that, this one might be in the same position as Legends 2, and cause me to write off the whole series as the only one I didn't like. Yet, here I am, hoping that I can do the same for the sequel, and lamenting what could have been. At number 1, it's The Misadventures of Tron-Bonne. And if you're thinking, wait, I thought you didn't do spin-offs for these. Well, consider this. First, mainline Legends is 2 games long. I said I was gonna need to finagle some stuff. Second, this is literally the only Mega Man series where a spin-off would take top spot if I were to include them, so it wouldn't exactly feel right not to. So, The Misadventures of Tron-Bonne is pretty much what the title advertises, a collection of oddball games and missions that you complete as the titular character. There's puzzles, heists, dungeons, even gambling, and just so that no one can say it's too much of a departure, so it doesn't count as a Legends title, you get the Gustav, which plays pretty much like Mega Man does in the mainline titles. In fact, this is the machine that you'll have to play the most often, and also in the few sections that are required, though for the most part, this game offers you a lot of freedom. You see, the end goal is to repay a debt, and you can cobble the amount together however you want. Well, within reason. You need to complete at least some missions, but there's enough options that if some of them don't click with you, you can just skip them, which should be agreeable to all but the pickiest of players. And this puts it right in a sweet spot for me, giving options but not so many that I get choice overload, though each is fun enough that I wouldn't mind if they were all required. I think. I tend to stick to the options that have a story attached to them, but I do enjoy a good puzzle and dungeon crawler, though I'd still probably avoid the casino since that seems like a method to skip the others. You also get a few mini-games to power up your Serbots, which do demand a fair bit to see results, but they're still goofy enough that I'm happy to play them, even if I wish they were a bit more forgiving. The big thing though is the writing and voice acting. The Bonds were always my favorite Legends characters, so a game focusing on them already sounds too good to be true. While the story is fairly simple, they still have really fun dialogue and scenarios, along with some nice character portraits and of course, the silly, terrific voice acting you'd expect. All combining to make things a lot more enjoyable than you'd probably figure if I simply summarize things. So while this might be an odd choice for top, This spin-off does pretty much everything I liked in the mainline stuff, but with a lot more thrown in. Well, outside of the controls. The dual stick would have been nice, but it's easy to ignore when everything else is so delightful. You know, I actually considered making this list, Legends, Legends 2, and then 64, as a dirty trick to get us up to at least 3 games. It wouldn't have exactly felt fair though to put Legends at the bottom just because I personally couldn't get the game to work after opening up the main gate. It would always just crash during the cutscene. Was really enjoying that version up until then though, and I'm still holding out hope for a Legacy collection, though I suppose the PS3 storefront is another possibility. Still, was a bit awkward trying to figure out how to pull this one off since Legends doesn't exactly have a sister series I could pair it with like Zero ZX. If I ever redo my rankings to include side stuff, I should have an easier time of things since the 2 Japanese-only titles recently became available to play in English. I should have a chance to get through those by the time I get around to a redo. But hey, that's enough out of me. What are your own rankings for the Legends titles? Keep it as short or use whatever stupid tricks you want. With that, thanks as always for watching, and maybe consider subscribing if you're into retro games, especially Mega Man. Also, did you notice that this list was an actual countdown? Legends 3, 2, 1, and Misadventures is a prequel, so 0.